Welcome y bienvenidos to this episode of the Cultural Capacity Podcast. I am your host, and I'm really excited to welcome our guest for this episode. My name is Justine Gonzalez, and I am happy to welcome not only a person who's become a great colleague over the past few years, but who has a mission with one of his organizations that's near and dear to my heart. And I get the pleasure of serving on the board for that organization. But one thing I like to do, Mr. Blake Nathan, before I have you introduce yourself and what that means to you, tell us a little bit of your story, is I like to give the guests their flowers from kind of like where I sit. So I like to also give context usually because some of my guests, I've literally, we've become internet friends. Some people I've known for like 20 years. So I think I have known you or been in common spaces with you, maybe going on 4 or 5 years, give or take. And then I've gotten the pleasure of serving on the board of Educate Me Foundation, which is a nonprofit you founded for the past 2 years almost. Which has been awesome and a great experience too. But one thing I like to always point out is a character attribute. So before I give the floor to you, is one thing that I really admire about you, Blake, is just your consistency to show up. And let me expound a bit, only because so listeners and viewers have kind of a picture of who you are. And this is not a person that I see all the time or anything like that, but solely from just conversation and also your actions, I know that your consistency of showing up, not only for yourself and the mission of your organization, but for your daughters and your wife. To me, that's always a consistent thread that I see in your life. So I wanted to give you that today because that's something I really admire about you. And I strive to be better about managing my own energy so I can show up better. So that's something I learned a lot about from watching you. So let me give over the floor to you and let you tell us just a little bit about yourself. And however you want to introduce yourself.
Oh man. And so one, I'm gonna receive those flowers and receive those compliments. Because I think oftentimes I struggle with when people give me compliments, is like you try to downplay it a little bit and you're like, oh, that's nothing, or
I can relate.
Hey, that's fine. Or hey, or you put the compliment back on someone else. Oh, thank you, Justine. You're so wonderful too. And so I'm gonna receive those today. And I appreciate those compliments. And I'm glad that's a good character attribute that you pulled away. And so that means a lot. And so for those, like Justine said, I'm Blake Nathan, first name, last name. I'm starting to add that to my intro because people sometimes call me Nathan Blake or Nathan. And so shout out to my mom for giving me 2 first names. And also shout out to my dad for last name Nathan. But Blake Nathan, I'm the CEO and founder of the Educate Me Foundation, as Justine mentioned. I also run a consulting company that I help aspiring nonprofit founders help launch, scale, and sustain their tax-exempt nonprofit organizations. So I've been doing that for the last 2 years as well. But really, my day-to-day is centered around Educate Me. So kind of my story, grew up on the far east side of Atlanta, Georgia, and a city called Stone Mountain, Georgia. Grew up there all my life. Then I went to Tennessee State once I graduated from high school, HBCU in Nashville, Tennessee. I majored in aviation. I thought I wanted to be a pilot. I had aspirations like to travel the world, be in the cockpit, meeting new people, and just being in the skies. To me, it's just like physics is amazing to see like an aircraft that weighed that many tons to be, in the air and doesn't fall the sky. It was like amazing as a kid. And when I went to college, I wanted to major in, aviation, which I did. But I had like this call to service like around college too as well, where I started, as a college student, you're trying to like make ends meet. I started going to class and I'm like, hey, let me think about trying to make some income. And so one of my fraternity brothers, his mom owned a childcare center called Educare Richmond Center. So I shout them out too, because without Miss Michelle, who was my boss at the time, I probably would never been introduced to education. I dabbled and dabbled with it in high school because I was part of like Future Educators of America, but clearly my major was aviation. And so I got a chance to work in like the infant room, Toddler 1, Toddler 2 rooms, working with students like fine motor skills, changing diapers, burping babies. And
Wow.
so that was my first.
I did not know this
Yeah.
about you.
Yeah. So that was my first introduction to education. And too, like anybody would say this that works with that young group of students, that's almost the most important years of a child development is like from infancy to like 3 years,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And I didn't know that until like being in the childcare system. And so from there, I started also working at the after school program, like reading literacy teacher and like doing like enrichment activities with middle school students. And so I got a chance to I saw two spectrums, like elder childhood education, middle school students. And I just really gravitated towards like, since the middle school students can talk, right? And, they were old enough to kind of understand and comprehend. I mean, every day you walked in that building in the after school programs, like it was like a new day, like new challenges to face, new goals that students hit. You're advocating on your students' behalf. You're like actually talking with the teacher, like, hey, why did the student miss this assignment today? Like, what should we be working on for the first hours of our homework sessions? And so it was really, to me, rewarding, but it's also like the spark plug went off. It's like, oh, this may be what I want to do. It's like teach. And so I went back to my university. I was like, I want to change my major education in math. It's like, if you do that, you're going to be here for additional few years. I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to stay aviation. And then I ended up finding a program at the time was called the Woodrow Wilson National Teaching Fellowship. And it focuses on STEM teachers. And I moved to Indianapolis in 2012. Started my teaching career working in Warren Township on the far east side of Indianapolis. So I'm an east side baby through and through, I guess. So worked on the far east side of Indianapolis in Warren Township. And Warren was my home. I student taught in Warren. Then I taught full time as a licensed teacher, teaching technology education to 7th and 8th grade kiddos. And that's why I just felt like a rock star. I mean, like middle school students, like they still think like your adults are cool, but they also think sometimes they're too grown. They're like in this true puberty stage and like
there's never a dull. There's never a dull.
Oh yeah, man. It's like one day they love you. Yeah. The next day they hate you. Like, didn't you just like get a selfie like yesterday and like they see the hallways?
One day the halls smell like pure BO and sweat, and the next they smell like Axe body spray.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. And it's like, dude, you put too much spray on after gym class today, son.
Oh, it didn't mask what you're smelling.
Yeah. So, but I taught for 3 years, and I was this young teacher, and I think there's a lot of teachers when they first year teachers when they go in the classroom. For the ones I've encountered, it's like this sense of like, man, you're just energetic. You want to change the world of education. You want to change lives on a day-to-day basis. And like, if there's a committee to be a part of, you raising your hand, you want to be on that committee because it's like, I'm a teacher. I came to teach, and I want to be able to like, I want like what's going on around the school. And you got some teachers like, hey, these are my 4 walls. I'm in it. That wasn't me. And because I had aspirations, I thought I would be a building principal. So I got a master's in technology education, but a master's in like educational leadership. Because I was like, ever since I was in high school, my first job working at Sonics, like I just wanted to learn how the system works, even from like a restaurant perspective. And then like when I got into teaching, I'm like, okay, I know what I'm doing in my classroom, but like what's going on outside my classroom, like across the building, across the district, across the city, community, et cetera. And so I knew for me, my aspiration was to be a building principal. I knew I had to understand like how parent engagement works and parent involvement, like how we have like a PBIS system in place. Like, what does that look like? How do we do our professional development training? And how is our community partners play a role in like our school success? Like all these different moving parts that people don't really think about because most time you just think about teaching, right? And that wasn't me. And so, but as my first few years living this rock star life as a teacher, because, I felt like that when I was in front of my students, like wore a student every day and everybody's like, oh, Mr. Nathan. And people just, you just had a student population gravitate towards me. And for some reason I thought I was like, okay, I was a cool teacher. And like we were doing project-based learning and we were building projects in my classroom.
He's young, he's fun.
Yeah, like this is like my like escape from all my other classes, like technology class. Like we're doing Vex robotics, we're doing coding, we're like building boats, like live boats that we're gonna race and swim, like an actual swimming pool. I thought it was because of that, but then also like, okay, I can't give myself that much credit. But I think majority of the reason that these students gravitated towards me because I was the only Black male teacher in my school building for the first 2 years of my teaching career. And so really I was like kind of like almost like, yeah, I was a cool teacher, I believe, right? I give myself some credit, but I was also this beacon of hope for a lot of students, like because they didn't
So
see
at
that.
that time, quick question, at
Yeah.
that time, you weren't necessarily at that time aware or even correlating the power of the fact that you were the only Black male teacher that
Yeah.
many of those students might ever even see
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
one of their school experiences. You're just thinking, well, it's because I'm energetic and I'm
Yeah.
teaching in a great way that's hands-on.
Yeah. And then just saying that even go a little bit deeper, and I know we're probably gonna talk about this later, but it's like, I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, which is predominantly, minority city, or
Yep.
it's considered an urban city. I grew up in, I don't think I ever encountered an individual that did not classify as African American until like my high school years. Like, with majority student population is all Black. I had Black teachers. I went to HBCU, Black professors, Black university. And it really wasn't until like when I went to Indianapolis, then I got a chance to see like when I'm working, I'm like, oh, well, like I'm serving Black students, but I'm just, again, I'm so deep into like grad school, so deep into
Yes.
teaching. I didn't sit back like, oh, hold on, my colleagues are not Black men. Like we're,
And the lens you grew up in,
yeah,
it was
exactly.
normal to be in all Black neighborhood, all Black school. And do we want to also give watchers and listeners a little bit of context in case they're watching this and unaware of why that still happens in the United States? How can that be that in the United States there are still entire neighborhoods, whether it's Chicago, Atlanta, New York, in massively segregated, where still very common today, a white person can go all the way through and you never really encounter a Black person, or a Black person can go all the way through in their neighborhood, their schooling experiences, and never really encounter a white person. Why is that, right? And I'll give a little, because Blake knows I nerd out even about like cultural patterns in our country. But one of the interesting things I'm finding, even in groups that I work with in schools, is that people don't have an understanding of the concept of redlining, the concept of how our tax system and our zip codes, which all determine schools and where they would be from the public, system perspective, that all of that played a role, and it was done very intentionally to segregate. Here in the United States, as well as South Africa, those are the two most dominant examples that we have on earth and in history, where because you had both large white and large Black populations in the same country, people often, they dismiss and say, well, it's all about class, it's not about race. Well, for example, if I talk about the country of Nigeria, and you're looking at a predominantly African population, you could argue, yes, there's classism, there's classes, but what you don't have is that additional layer of white-led systems and white supremacy thought. So then it's arguable you had not only South Africa, but still present today in the United States, this conflating of not only if you're Black, there was this systemically racist systems created from the inception of the country, but then on top of that, it's conflated with the class system. Yeah. So let me stop, because I nerd out about
you're good.
Like the balcony, the galaxy view of like, this is what's happening. And sometimes I really think that even whether you're Black or white or in between and brown or whatever, I don't know that we all have a very clear understanding of the intentional design as to how Blake could go all the way through and never really have interactions with white people.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And I think it wasn't until I was at TSU in Nashville where I really had relationships with a white person. Like when my colleague, like I worked for a company, Red Bull, for example, like
What?
my boss, that was a cool job to have as a college student.
Awesome. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you really get a chance to understand their culture. So like, you're working with them as well. And you get a chance to experience like, and you realize like, oh man, like we're not that much different. We may do different traditions and, have different life experiences, of course, but it's like, oh, like you like some things, the same things I like, or you guys have the same traditions we have. And now granted, it's still some to different things, that different perspectives, but it's like, oh, you're pretty cool. Like I have a relationship with you and I
Right.
care about you as a person. And like, we have good intentions behind this relationship, because I want you to succeed. It's not just for the role that we're playing as for the company. It was like, we're all college students. We're all on the same path to get our education. We want to provide a better life for our families back home. So it's like, oh, when we get past all the layers of,
The systems.
The systems and misunderstandings, because granted, I did grow up in the South. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. Stone Mountain, Georgia. We know about, the KKK and Martin Luther King, all those different things. So it's not, and my family's from Memphis, Tennessee. We talked about like redlining. Like my mother, not my grandmother, my mother was alive when MLK was shot. My mother lived in the same city when MLK got shot. And my mother understood like when they desegregated Memphis, Tennessee and Shelby County schools, what it was like to like have your students get bused over to a city to a new school. So it's like, it's not like multiple generations where it doesn't touch me, and I have an understanding of it. And so that was my perspective, is like, oh, well, and again, like you say, for us, we grew up in an all Black neighborhood. One, probably my mom thought was more safer, right? Be around individuals that look like you, that share some cultural norms with you. Yeah. But we also didn't feel like we had to go on another side of the city to feel like this lifestyle, like, oh, we made it, right? And I was fortunate enough, the people that's watching, like, bless my mom and my father had a stable income, stable job. I didn't feel like I ever wanted for anything growing up. We took trips. So like, my struggle that I didn't experience the struggle that my students experience, right? And I'm blessed to say that. And so, and that's the unique thing about like Atlanta or Chicago or LA, a DC, a Houston. You can go in cities like those that are very urban communities and feel like you can live in a nice neighborhood and you're surrounded by people that look like you.
Yeah.
And so, and you can go in good schools, right? Public, private, charter, that are you don't have to go across the city to get that quality education. And that's what I was used to. So moving to the Midwest, where it's like, oh, well, we got to cross the city lines to have a good quality education. We got to live in this certain zip code to have a certain house or live a certain lifestyle, right? And I think, and we can go all the way back to Brown versus Board of Education, and you can ask yourself the $1 million question: was desegregation of schools a good thing or was it a bad thing, right? Because to this day, our school systems are probably more desegregated now, well, more segregated now than they were probably before, right? And it's just and it's not even really intentional, but just think about it, like, I use Indianapolis as a prime example, right? On the east side is a lot different from the northeast side. It's different from the south side. It's different from the west side, right? And so I just want people to understand that too. And sometimes not for intentionality purposes. It's like you think about the housing market back in the 60s and 70s. Where were Black and brown people living in? They were probably living closer to the city, right? And now, gentrification goes on, redlining comes out and all these different things, and Black people can't get houses in some of these areas. And so now they're getting pushed to the outskirts because that's a more affordable housing on the suburban areas of the city. And now they're becoming the more Blacker populated cities. And so you can get deep with it.
Fascinating.
You can get really deep with it. It's a lot of things, a lot of like, I would call them like stems to go through and think about. It's just not like, because again, I understood too in my years of teaching, like my story was not the same story of my current students, right? To have that opportunity to kind of like be in that type of neighborhood, go to a HBCU, etc. But the story of my students was a common story of a lot of students across the nation, because Black men only represent 2% of the teacher workforce. And so for me, it was like, oh, well, hey, Xavier, I understand that you're in this classroom, but like, it's only 2% of us in this whole entire nation's in the classroom right now. So it's a highly possible chance that there's a student in your same situation in the school next door or the school across the city. And so
How did you feel though when you did start making that connection of the dots? Because you came in, is that interesting? You came in 2012 and I left Indianapolis in 2012 to go to
Yeah.
Chicago, but I actually started my student teaching experience was at when Francis Bellamy School 102 was still open off of
Mm,
38th and Post.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I actually started my career on the East Side too. But when you started kind of having those aha moments, like, oh, wait, I see what's happening. Did you also start to become more hyper aware of like if you would be overutilized for discipline, for example?
Oh
Because
yeah.
often a common thing that happens, again, for listeners, if you're not in the education sector, but specifically in public schools, if you have a lack of representation, specifically, I have often seen it happen with Black men who are employed, then the teachers, and that could be any shade, any gender, but then often that is seen as you're the strong Black male. We need you to be the disciplinarian.
Yeah.
Even if that's not your role, did you start to see things like that happening?
Yeah, and I think part of it reflecting back on my years like in the classroom. I would say, maybe made my bed and I needed to lay in it because I think sometimes I
Mm,
was overextending myself. And again,
okay.
like where I taught middle school, we probably had a student population maybe close to the middle school itself, maybe 600 students, right?
Okay.
And I taught, what considered to a lot of people like maybe an elective course. And
Yeah.
so I had a lot of students that were, sixth graders that will potentially take my class as seventh graders, right? And again, like, you're on hallway duty, bus duty, cafeteria duty, whatever the case may be. So you're getting to see all the students. And so
Right.
you got a lot of students like looking at you like, oh, who's that? Like, what do you teach? Like, and I'm like, I teach tech ed. Like, oh, cool. Like, and then of course, when you're greeting students in the morning and like, again, the gravitation towards you because like, oh, you're suited, you're a teacher, you're young, probably more, relatable. And so you naturally, and your colleagues are paying attention too. They can see this is
Right.
happening.
Right.
They're like, oh man,
Right.
like they're Mr. Nathan. He's, I didn't see, Johnny act like that in my class. Like, why is he dapping up
Right.
Mr. Nathan and acting like he has met him, he known him since, the beginning of the time. And I'm like, I ain't no control over that, And
Right.
so I understand that part of it, right? And then again, I had a thirst and desire to um really learn how my school building was outside of my classroom. Like I took the initiative, like going to other classes and just sitting there during my prep
Yep.
period, like going to language arts class, or because granted, my class management skills were good, but you have some students that, like, hey, what's going on? Like, why are you
Mhm.
behaving this way? And so I took the initiative, like sometimes is going to somebody else's classroom to see how he may act in Justine's class.
Yep.
And then I may
Yep.
talk to Justine, like, okay,
Yep.
Justine, like, I see Xavier's, he's getting his bell work done. He's coming in class. He's not being disturbance to the instruction. What are you doing? And you like, they say, hey, like they know the routine when they come to my class that the first thing they do is look at the board, they get their entry ticket, they sit
Yeah.
down, make sure they got materials, and then they
Yep.
have 5 minutes, even though I'm by the door, make sure I'm greeting everybody coming in. Like that's the expectation. So, like, okay, Justine, that's what you're doing. Next day, I'm gonna set the tone. Hey guys, this is the routine that we're gonna do moving forward.
Right.
And then you see kind of
Because that structure worked for that student.
exactly. And so
And
now you see the
often,
dynamics change,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
so again, part of it was like I wanted to see how every student's acting in different classrooms. And again, you're visiting classrooms, and sometimes when you go in a classroom where the class is just mayhem, and then when you walk in as this kind of like suited and booted Black male teacher, and you walk in that classroom and you start seeing the students just tighten up. They're like, oh, like, but one, they don't know you because they're not on your roster, and two, you're like, okay, I'm gonna be more respectful now because somebody else is in the classroom.
Right.
And a teacher notices that too. And so they're like,
Yep.
oh, well, not only we see him in the hallway, students are gravitating towards, he's actually just coming in the classroom, checking in some of his other students. And then maybe my students that are being disturbed are now acting a little bit better. And, I see him floating around, serving on school
Mhm.
improvement committee and all these things. And so I stretch myself probably too thin too early, which I advise any teacher just kind of take what you can manage. You don't want to have any burnout like that. But then it's like this invisible Black teacher tax, right? It's like you almost feel like it's a duty of yours, especially if you're the only Black male teacher in your building or only Black teacher, or let's say you're the minority teacher population in your building. You feel like, man, we got to do something for these students, our children, our kids. Like, that's our goal. Like, we want to make sure like we can not just be the beacon of hope, but like we're almost like the savior at times. And then I know one of my veteran teachers and my mentors told me like, well, Blake, you understand too, like you're a middle school teacher, and so you can't save all students. And so you're just praying that if you didn't get to save them in 7th grade,
right,
you don't get to save them in 8th grade, that 9th grade teacher can save them. And I mean about that is like potentially, hopefully someone, the light bulb will go off in their head by the time they get to one teacher. And then again, you can't save all students, right? And so we understand it too. But as a young teacher, you're like, I want to help everybody. I want to save everybody. But then, yeah, like you said, I had stories where students did get sent to my classroom that's not on my classroom roster, that I didn't know their name. And I'm like, where'd you come from? And it was like, oh, so-and-so
why are you
out. And I'm like, well, I'm in the middle of instruction, and of course I'm teaching technology. We're using bandsaw, table saws, soldering irons. Like, I can't have you in here right now. But then
you can't just babysit a child.
Yeah. And but again, how I'm wired as a human, I'm like, hey, let's just sit in here and just talk to me. Like, what's going on? Because I feel like by my 2nd and 3rd year, I have enough class management skills where like I can pay attention to what everybody's got going on. And so if I do need to redirect a student or have a one-on-one conversation with a student, I had enough rapport with my students where it's like, oh, Miss Nathan's handling something, like I need to be on my P's and Q's because he's not watching me, right? Because it's a safety issue if we're not paying attention to ourselves. And so, but yes, that Black teacher tax, right? And then it's like you're getting responsibilities and you're getting poached to like, hey, you want to be on this committee? And like, oh, I do want to be on this committee. But I think for me too, it wasn't as bad because I had a desire to be on these committees because I wanted to, again, learn how the system is working. If you don't know what's going on in the data talk meetings, volunteer to be in the data talk meetings. If you don't look at the school discipline reports and why is our suspension rate, our referral rate is so high, maybe you need to be in the PBI's committee, because we need to see like, do we have a common cultural lens on what we deem and think that is like a level 1 behavior, level 2 behavior, etc. Because then we can look in like, okay, well, why does the teacher have more referrals than this other teacher? And then look at the referrals and like, can we look at written in the referral, what did that student do? It's like, oh, well, in my classroom, that's not warrant a referral. That's just warrant like a redirection or a phone call home or, detention, or I'm removing your recess or your lunch. But, and again, you're just battling that. And I think as a Black teacher, that's the constant battle, especially when you're in a building where you're the minority, right?
What let me ask, and it might be, well, I don't think it'll be loaded for you or I, but sorry, email alert. So I have this might be a provocative question. But I think the more that people I'm a white passing Latina and you're a Black man. So I think the more that people can also just hear us talk about things across cultural lines, across racial lines, across skin tone lines, all the stuff, right? I think it's helpful. One of the other things historically, and again, because I know we have many listeners who are in multiple sectors, but I also always share that my heart and soul is education. And so I also love teaching people about how our system works and how it's designed. So, and you correct me because you might have different information on some of the figures I throw out here. And I'm going to ask you a specific question in a moment. But over time, when you look at specifically in the United States with public schools, we still sit at around 80% of teachers. Around 80% of the teachers across the country are white females.
Yeah. And
I'm naming facts. And this is also important, again, from a system standpoint. That happened early on because first of all, public school system, when they were created, were not created for all. They were segregated. And so you had Black schools with Black teachers and that was that. But then you had this whole other realm emerging, and who did they say, well, who can we pay very little, and who isn't a person at home with kids? Single white women.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was actually a very specific like lineage you can see within our public system as to why it's still a profession that's saturated with white women.
Mm-hmm.
And that isn't a bash. So again, if you're watching this or you're listening, I'm a white passing Latina. I'm saying facts and I'm breaking this down so that we can have a conversation and also understand from other lenses. Blake, you said something that caught me down this trail, because you said you see students and you go, I want to really protect them because also on top of it, they look like me and they're in this setting. What I'm trying to show for viewers, listeners, etc., is that that's never a bash on something you can't change. That's as trivial as your skin color.
Mm-hmm.
But because our systems have placed that importance, and we know the facts of the lens of even our public schools today, it makes complete sense to me why you as a Black man would see other Black children and feel that sense of protection, because what school are they going into every day, and who's predominantly, what is the one lens?
Mm-hmm.
Not because it's all the same for every white woman, but what's the predominant lens that is still being taught through by very nature is white women.
Yeah.
So what advice from your perspective, what advice would you as a Black man who's an educator give in that regard?
Yeah.
If I'm say that a white woman's watching this and they're going, well, I can't change how I look and I can't change my gender, because that is, I know from facilitating these conversations, that's typically the emotional reaction
Mm-hmm.
that I think any person has when you hear some broad things and then you immediately go, well, is that me? I'm not racist.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's so many things to think about, right? And the first thing when you made that statement, the first thing I thought about, like, if it was a white woman was watching this right now and they were like, man, like, I can't change that, and like, I'm here fighting for my Black and brown students as well, like, you know, even though I'm a white woman. And I gotta shout out my mentor teacher, Becky Taylor, is a white woman. Yeah, and so she, and I mean, to this day, I see on social media, like, I know her sons, her husband, Trent, and like, and you would never know like what this color skin Becky was, right? Because she just loved kids. And I mean, to teach high school, again, on the far east side of Indy, and like the population she was working with, it was like, it didn't matter the tallest 6'3" football player in her classroom, like, they just respected her, like, because they knew out the gate, like, she just cared for them, you know, and she made teaching fun, engaging, and she just cared them as a person first. Like, hey, you having a bad day? Like, let's talk about it. Like, hey, you know, I'm here. And so I kind of picked that up from her. And so I always say this too, like, you know, it for a white woman that's in education right now, because again, it is over 80%. You're right, those numbers are correct. And it's like,
you're fact checking for me.
Yeah. I mean, and it's like, we need more allies. And when I say allies, you know, and that's why you have a lot of training going on right now in schools of like cultural competency trainings, because again, like, you know, when I'm as an adult, when I'm talking with my homeboys, my friends, and we're watching the game, we're loud, we're rowdy, you know, it's not disrespectful. It's just like our nature, how we're talking or how we're watching the game. You know, that's part of our culture, right? To a certain degree. Maybe when I'm talking to an adult, I'm not, you know, if I was a younger student, I'm not always looking in their face. If I'm making eye contact with you, like, maybe I've been taught not to make eye contact. But I mean, I'm being disobedient. Right. Maybe if I'm sagging my pants, maybe that's my fashion statement. It's not, I'm not trying to be against dress code, you know. And so I think at times, you know, and if you look at the discipline reports, right, and the referrals, and it's like what a teacher may feel. Again, I understand. And I'm using Becky as a good example, and she'll probably understand this. Becky's probably 5'6", maybe weigh $130, you know, nice mellow tone, soft voice, white woman, probably, I think, brown hair, right? And so, and if a 5'10" young man that's 200 pounds is raising his voice at her, she may think that's disrespectful, right? And that's out of term, and that's against her classroom rules, since they'll be raising your voice and all those things. But Becky can make two decisions in that situation. One, I'm gonna write the student up because I'm sticking to my classroom norms. I need to make sure, like, school policies, like student disrespectful, we write them up, like that's it's black and white. Or Becky can use that situation to redirect opportunity to understand, like, why that student is talking to her that way, to see if it's some deeper layers to the situation. And I just think sometimes too, like, that's a big problem in education right now. We're not taking the time just to see, like, why students are behaving the way they are.
Oh, thank you. And adults.
Adults. Yeah, in adults.
Right? Why are all your teachers resigning and calling off principal so-and-so?
Yeah.
Have we sat down and paused and said, what's going on?
Yeah.
How can I support you?
Yeah. And I think that's a big issue. And so, and I've seen it happen so many times. I mean, I served on the special education committees on a district level, and we're like, why is our Black boys being written up this much? Why are they getting suspended so much? In Indiana, we're the number 2 state in the nation for suspension of Black boys. Like, it's a reason for that. Yeah. And if we're gonna say, okay, we look at the data, 80% of our teacher population is white women. Suspension rate, the majority of our suspension rate is Black boys. There's a disconnect there, and it may be
historically instilled fear, whether it's conscious or subconscious, and it can come from all different directions. It might not even be like, I'm speaking very broadly because I know there's exceptions to everything that we're talking about. But to your point, it's how do I first understand these little humans as well as my colleagues that are adult humans? How do I understand who they are? And not just some arbitrary labels that have been created. And I know we all operate off of that, but let me understand who they actually are. And that is also, one of my colleagues always says it, is it all about the data? So is that kid just a number, financial number, test score number towards your evaluation, or is it about Daniel? And so that, I think that could alleviate a lot. But to your point, if I'm a white woman who's a teacher in a predominantly Black and brown population, and I also have taken no initiative, nor do I have any interest to even pick up a book and read about something outside of my own world and my own context and what I always feel comfortable with, I'm only going to be beholden to how small my lens is.
Yeah. I mean, and I think too, I mean, as deep as we want to get into, like, teaching to the standard and teaching academics, and, like, I got to read up on this lesson plan and this curriculum and make sure my lesson plan is standard aligned. Like, sometimes it's like, I need to take an hour just to see, like, what are the new TikTok trends, or what's going, like, what are the songs my students are listening to? Because, I mean, you have a student in the classroom, they're making some slang word, and you're like, is this disrespectful? Or it's like, or it could not be. It's maybe this their terminology, like, is there ebonics?
Something SpongeBob said.
Yeah, like, but it's like, I mean, you definitely want to listen sometimes to music your students listen to kind of, not saying just want to relate to them, like, okay, what is their world about, right? And what are they seeing on social media and all those different things. But I mean, it's big. But I also say this too, like, I love sports, and I always, for our listeners, like, I'm a football fanatic. I love basketball, baseball, etc. But I use a lot of sports analogies. So, like, I'm gonna give you a prime example. Let's say I'm using Indianapolis Colts, for example, and this is probably a good one. I'm an Atlanta Falcons fan, right?
I was just gonna say Colts. Okay.
Yeah. But think about this, right? If I went to let's say I went to a bar and it was all Colts fans, and I had my Atlanta Falcons jersey on, how probably uncomfortable that situation probably would be. They were like, why is you here? Like, what's going on? And, but we're here to all watch the game. Like, that's why we're here. We're here to watch the game.
Regardless. You're there for a common reason.
Yeah. But if I had a Colts jersey on, it's going to be like, oh my God, like, hey, what's up? You're a Colts fan. And I think, and I'm using that analogy because, like, that's the kind of same kind of viewpoint sometimes teachers should have. It's like, yeah, like, at the end of the day, like, we're on the same team. We're here for the
I
same
love that.
mission. We're rooting for the same goal. Regardless of you rooting for your team to win or lose, like we're here to cheer on our team. And I think, unfortunately, like the majority right now are white women, right? But we're here on the same team. Like we're trying to get students to the finish line. We're trying to get them to graduate, go off to college, provide for their families, create generational wealth, and just learn a skill set, potentially go into trades, like whatever the case may be. And yeah, we may be wearing different jerseys, but we're all on the same team.
Yep.
Now, granted, I may be in a school where the jersey is more populated than my jersey that I'm wearing, but again, we're here for the same reason. And I think at the end of the day, we kind of have that mindset.
Yeah,
we'll be in a better position. Now, granted, and that's again going to the analogy. You have these diehard fans that's like, I don't care if we root for the same sport or we watching the same game.
there it is.
It's Colt Nation or nothing else. It's Falcons
Right,
Nation,
right.
Steelers Nation, Raiders Nation. It's just I'm loyal to my team and I want my team to win. And all I'm saying, when we think about anything about schools, you think about students, teachers, at the end of the day, we're all on the same team. We may be wearing different jerseys, but we obviously have the same goal.
That's a great analogy, Blake. Thank you for that.
No problem.
So yeah. So, and thank you for entertaining. You know, I go down rabbit trails with questions. What entertaining my little rabbit trails. So let's move into the next kind of question. We talked a little bit about your journey thus far, and obviously that turned into some other conversations too. What are your most frequently asked questions I'm going to ask it from the lens you're currently in as the you're a founder of multiple organizations, but specifically the founder of a nonprofit.
Yeah.
What is your most frequently asked one of your most frequently asked questions, partly too, because if you're a listener and you're considering starting a nonprofit, and we'll have him share where you can find him at the end of this interview, but he is very adept at also navigating how to successfully sustain a nonprofit. Yeah. And I see that is where this organization and also then your mission can never go anywhere. I see a lot of nonprofits, they close up shop after 2 years because there's no financially sustainable models. And I know that you're very good at that. What do you most frequently get asked right now in pertains to, I want to start a nonprofit?
Yeah. And so I think, I'm glad you asked that question. So like the frequently asked question I get for educate these purposes, right, is, and I think the conversation has switched over the years. In my early years, it's like, how do we recruit more Black and brown teachers? Like, and I think that's probably still the most common one. I think the conversation is shifting a little bit to the other R's, like how do we retain more Black teachers? And I think, again, we can roll the red carpet out for teachers. We can get them in our school buildings and sell them this great dream about like, oh, this is how your class is going to be. This is like the support you're going to have. You're going to have a mentor. You're going to get paid. We have a growth model where, you want to go into like leadership and eventually in a few years, this is what we offer. And then you sell them all that, and then against the building, it's like, this is nothing what you promised me. And so I think now the conversation and a lot of questions I'm getting now is like, hey, Blake, like, how do we help retain more teachers? Like, what can we do, to support our current teachers? Like, what are some of the issues that current teachers are facing? And I think once you kind of answer that second question, like the retention piece, the recruitment piece will come a lot easier, because now people are getting a chance to see what they're walking into and like the longevity of being in the profession. And I think too is just, that's for us, like the biggest thing that we get asked. And it's like, I'm always like, okay, I'm focused on the retention and the recruitment from both sides. And I think too, for us is just thinking through like different strategies of what that looks like. And I think the easiest answer sometimes, like, we need to invest more money. But I also see a lot of times, we want to invest a lot more money into these supports, but then it's like, you ask yourself, like, what does that look like? And so, for us, we're offering now multiple supports to recruit and retain teachers. And I think for us, it's kind of being like that blueprint potentially for a district to adopt or a city to adopt or a state to adopt, because that's what's going to take. It's going to take some investment in the monetary investment.
Energy investment.
Yeah.
Because that's the other reality. I'm always curious how often, I guess, how do you navigate, because because Educate Me Foundation is such a very specific, necessary, vital, like, goal And I also want to give you a shout out. You were just featured in NBC.
Oh yeah.
Yes, you were
Yes.
just a shout out because you were featured for this very topic of
Mhm.
this whole idea specifically with Black teacher, not just recruitment, like you said, but now the retention of it. Because to your point, and this is not just education. I've seen this across now all the sectors, especially the onslaught of reactive behaviors, regardless of intentions, but after specifically Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd's murder, Breonna Taylor's murder, you saw the onslaught of reactions from a more corporate standpoint.
Yeah.
But then you have the exhaustion, right? So one of the questions, this is my own shameless plug for me and Augustin Amua's book, because it's on leadership retention specifically.
Yeah.
But one of the things we always ask organizations, exactly what I know is very aligned to our mission at Educate Me Foundation, is, well, what's underneath that? So I'm curious what happens when you get outreach from an org, and they're like, we just want more Black people, Nathan, Blake.
Yeah.
Like if they're like, if we just want more Black people, Blake, what do you say in response to that? And again, I know some of our listeners and viewers might find these things provocative. You can turn it off if you find it too provocative. But I'm asking because again, a lot of people are seeing it. It's very like tokenizing. What do you do when you get outreach like that? That's just a curious question that I have, because personally, as a consulting firm founder who is Latina, it's very, very common and has been since I started that I will get outreach. Hey, Gonzalez, can you teach us how to talk better with Hispanics?
Yeah.
Those are literal things I've been asked.
Yeah. And I think too, like prime example, we as an organization and I get emails weekly about, hey, Blake, I'm a school in this city. I need help recruiting Black and brown teachers. Or, hey, like, what does that look like for Educate Me to support us? And honestly, it took us years to get to this point of like, because when you first, again, you talked about nonprofit, like being in existence, like in the early years, you're like, oh, I need to get clients. I need to bring in revenue. And so you're not really selective about the clients you work with and schools you work with. I think now we're kind of in a position like to really know our identity and understand like where we are really where we putting our flag in the ground in this diversity, equity, inclusion space, especially in education. And I think now for us, it's like if somebody comes to us in that asking that question, the first thing I ask is like, currently, what does your strategic plan say about diversity, equity, inclusion? Like, what systems you currently have in place for me to even entertain a conversation? Because, our business model right now is not like we're going to headhunt to find you Black teachers and like sell them the dream about coming to your school. It's more so consulting now and like, okay, you want to recruit, because the biggest thing is we want to show them how to fish themselves. After you lead them, you can lead them to the water, right? But you want to show them how to fish for themselves, because when Educate Me is not there and on a day-to-day basis, we're not in that city, I don't need our name to be associated with like, oh, this teacher didn't work really well in my school building, or, because they're not a part of our program, right? We're just almost marketing for your school or being an affiliate for your school. And at times it's like we're endorsing your school, and that's not the situation. And so now it's kind of, because that's a big thing. Like if I bring a teacher and I recruit a teacher on your behalf and I'm endorsing your school, now Educate Me's name is associated with that school, and that teacher goes in that building and has a horrific experience and they leave in a year, you're gonna come to us and say, hey, we need our money back for one. Can you go find me another teacher for two? And three, you were like, I'm not going to probably renew with you in the next year. Because, and so I always say this, we're going to under promise or how to over deliver. But in this recruiting space, it's like, now we're in the game of, I'll tell you our strategies. I'll tell you what we're currently raising dollars for and what we're doing, what this will look like. And it's going to be for you to implement it in your city, and that's what's going to take.
Oh, that's so interesting, because I think we typically find ourselves in similar parallels as we grow and evolve.
Yeah.
But I'm finding the same thing with our firm. What are there any other questions that organizations should be asking themselves, specifically if they're still on this lens of, oh, we're getting nailed because people go look at our board and all the pictures and they see that we're all white or whatever the narrative is that somebody thinks is the problem, which is actually much deeper than literally skin deep. Because when you simply ask the question, if somebody in your workplace, for example, listener subscribers, if somebody in your workplace or you're in a meeting and somebody says, well, we just need more Black people, or we just need more Indian people, or we just need more South African people, or whatever thing that you're trying to fill for some type of diversity thing, a quick way is, again, authentically and not from a place of judgment, but just seeking underneath that. Well, why do you think that? I mean, literally just asking your colleagues. And I know for some people that might feel weird, or maybe they don't feel comfortable, but if you don't ask, then you don't know what's underneath it. And it's an easy way to start better holding each other accountable when we are sitting in boardrooms making important decisions, when we are at an executive leadership table. That's very vital, to be willing to just go, why do you find that so important from a personal lens? Talk to us more about that. Maybe we should all share why that's so important, because what comes out with those type of questions is often people haven't thought beyond the surface level. And if you haven't cultivated the environment to help innovation thrive through inclusive practices, then that is a whole other conversation to try to just go, well, hire Sally because she's a woman and we need a female. We need a female in that role.
I mean, and I think, we talked about too, like the first thing we kind of ask is what's like outside of the systems in place, like how do you currently marketing to a diverse population, right? And I, look, like you said, look on somebody's website. Like if I see a flyer and it's not a person that looks like me, then am I gonna feel encouraged or excited to apply at the school, right? And I think too, the pushback I always get, and this is a common thing for districts and schools, charter school networks, et cetera, is that, oh, well, I don't know if I can offer this just for Black teachers, because then it seems like, then we're just funding the Black teachers, right? Or it's not ethically, appropriate for us to offer a specialized program just for, Black and brown teachers.
What do you say? Okay, wait, I need to know though. What do you say when somebody says that to you?
One my initial response is like, well, you can earmark some dollars to educate me, and then we can funnel the money from us to support your Black teachers, and that can be one of our partnerships. But also, my next response is always, again, going back to football analogies for my listeners. Sorry if you don't like sports. So the quarterback position in football is probably one of the most important positions, right? That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they're looking for certain characteristics and traits and attributes and all these different things, because you are leading your team. Outside of the center, you touch the ball the most in the game. Like you pass the ball, you hand the ball off, you make sure everybody knows their plays. You know the playbook because you need to know what the center is doing, the wide receivers, running back, everybody's doing, right? Pass protection. And so they get paid the most money. The coach knows that. The GM knows that. The owner knows that. We need to find the board, the fan base, the city knows it. We got to find the right quarterback. I'm an Atlanta Falcons fan, so everybody knows how I feel probably in Atlanta. We got to find the right quarterback to lead our team. Like that just sets the whole culture when you have the quarterback at the helm. And teams are not embarrassed to pay their quarterback premium dollars to win a championship.
They're very public. They're actually very public about it.
Yeah, like we need to get the right people in here. So my next response to that is like, I give them that analogy. So if a sport team understands that we need to pay the right amount of money to get the right person in here. Sometimes we need to create a special package deal. Sometimes we need to center our team around this quarterback. He needs wide receivers. He needs an offensive coordinator. He needs a strength and conditioning coach. He needs, all these different things, because if he flourishes, our whole entire team flourishes. And so I always say a district, like if you don't have the money to invest into Black teachers, then you don't expect to flourish. You don't expect to really create cultural change if you don't want to invest into recruiting more Black teachers, because at the end of the day, you put more Black and brown teachers in these school systems, it's going to be a better benefit for everybody in that school district. And again, we do this on a collegiate level. We create specialized scholarships on the collegiate level.
Yeah.
All
the time.
Yeah, I mean, we have different programs for in the housing industry for affordable housing. Doesn't matter
Yeah.
if you're a veteran, doesn't matter if you are low income, it's different. So I don't know why there's still this pushback at times for districts to be like,
Mhm.
yes, we're going to allocate $50,000 to do sign-on bonuses. District will say we're going to just offer that across the board to make it more equitable, right? And so it doesn't matter. We can't say
I
that
see.
we're only this is our Black teacher fund, right? And as you know, educating we're going to be unapologetically. We have a Black teacher residency, and we got a Black teacher fund. These dollars are specifically earmarked to Black people. So it's just what it
But
is,
it,
right?
it also says something too, again, if you especially, I would argue, especially if you're leading a district where you even have, I don't even want to put a number to it, but I don't even care if it's one child, right? And you're saying that you're about diversity,
Mhm.
you should have no issue being unapologetic about what you're doing to create that diversity. So it's always an interesting argument. I know for many people, I've heard them also say, well, I don't know that my boss would even approve it, so I don't want to advocate for it. So
And
then there's also that whole type of, we also have to, as leaders though, start taking ownership of our own role in that, because
yeah.
that's on me then. If I don't have the quote unquote, gumption, I guess,
Mhm.
to courageously approach my leader and say, we put out this statement after George Floyd was murdered, and we still haven't really done anything, and we're really not still attracting Black people to our district, Black teachers.
Mhm.
And what can we do about this? Because that's the reality. If you had an influx for schools, if you have an influx of special education students or deaf students and you need special programmatics for it, it's not discriminatory to list something that is only for people who have the specialty of
Mhm.
teaching those students.
Yeah.
And you put all kinds of money towards that. So
Yeah.
why are we not considering the same through the cultural
Because
lens?
it's a conversation that we're not ready to have. It's going to be a huge pushback probably from the community, the board. And that's why I always, for us, it's not for us and educate me when we're recruiting teachers and we're creating these programs and initiatives, it doesn't end in the classroom.
Yeah.
Like for us is that we need to get more people in school leadership. We need to get people more on school boards and policy and
Mhm.
nonprofit spaces, because these are the decision makers that are making these decisions behind closed doors. And
Right.
so at the end of the day, we're trying to create educational advocates. Like that's our biggest thing. Like we want to create people that are one creating educational equity, but really like are coming to advocate on behalf of,
Yeah.
equitable education practices. And then that's when you have decision makers at the table where it's not, you're not saying you don't care what the community says, but you feel like the pushback that you get is not warranted, because at the end of the day, what the decision you're trying to make is betterment for students, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
at the moment, when we don't have seats in the board, we're not in a lot of school leadership positions, and it's not Black and brown people in these roles, then it's like, oh, okay, well, the board doesn't approve this decision because they feel like, oh, I don't want to ruffle the feathers of my community members. I need them to support us and all these different things. And it's just that's when it turns into a political game, right? And you have to
Yep.
understand that too, is at the end of the day, people, you invest the money where you think you need to invest the money
Yeah.
into.
Yeah. Plain and simple.
If you are short buses because you can't get students to school, you're going to buy more buses.
Yep.
If you feel like, oh man, we're low on paper towels, toilet paper in our school building, we're going to go out and get more toilet paper and paper towels. I mean,
That's
you're
right.
going to invest the dollars where you think you need to invest the dollars based on the need that is out there. And we need more Black teachers, so we need
Yep.
to invest more dollars.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we are closing out here, but I have just two more quick questions.
Go ahead.
Well,
Go ahead.
actually three. As one is really short. That's really just a fun one based on something you shared earlier. What are this is a more kind of just a snapshot into, again, bringing us full circle into the lens of Blake Nathan today.
Mhm.
What's a key principle? Let's just go with one key principle that you continuously still see that is still showing up in your life. And maybe you can tie it to somebody who taught it to you or modeled it for you, but where you can go back to little Blake. So about 10-year-old Blake, what do you think is a principle that you kind of picked up or you adopted from family or a mentor that you still see as a guiding principle in your life?
Just one?
Just one.
Oh man.
Okay, you can do a
No, I
couple.
got
Let
one.
me
I
not
got
limit.
I got one because I think this one you can break it down to multiple things.
Okay.
I think for me, one of my key principles, you know, and I think my mom would even say this because that'll be the one person that would know me as 10 years old, right? Outside of my teachers. I think one of my key principles is like leading with love. And the reason I say that, you know, and I think that's why God has blessed me so much over these years. He's gave me a second chance at life for sure. And that's, you know, another conversation for another day. But
Oh man, we'll have to
let me tell you.
We'll have to have you back for part 2.
Well, yeah, in a nutshell, in college, I was shot. I think I don't know if people have probably seen the story, and I mean it's not a thing that's not public. The bullet went through my back, through my chest, punctured my lungs, and so luckily the bullet went through me, because if it didn't, then I probably wouldn't be here today. So I just have a different perspective on life in general, and I think too, like I have a purpose for my life. You know, some people that came to the hospital, and it was a big thing. I was in college at the time, and so my campus did like a prayer for me and all that stuff.
Wow.
So
I don't think, Blake, I'm just telling you the truth. I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, I don't think, yeah.
I don't, but to be fair, I also think for many of us, depending on our stories, it's not necessarily something you lead with or broadcast.
Oh, yeah.
Unless you get questions, because it, like you said, there's nuance to that. And it makes sense then when you talk with people further, why maybe they move the way they do.
Oh, yeah. And I think too, I mean, of course, everybody that's close to me knows that story, but it happened so many years ago, and it's just a faded memory at times. And I'm like, some days I got like, oh, this really did happen to me. And I mean, I have some PTSD situations. 4th of July is not a good holiday for me when I hear fireworks, but I say that because, you know, that's why I lead with love, because at the end of the day, like tomorrow's never promised. Some situations it's like, is it worth arguing and being upset about? That's how I try to lead my organization, leading with love. I think I'm very generous in situations, you know, like you know, I don't hold the money. Like people's like, oh well, if we, you know, I'm always trying to find, if it's a person I can work with and collaborate with, I'm like, you know, hey, can I bless you? Can we collaborate? I'm not gonna do a free for service. It's gonna be a fee for service. Like how much your service costs, right? And so I think for me it's like, and that goes back to my childhood for sure, because I think, you know, my grandmother, God rest her soul, like I just told her like what I wanted to do when I grew up. Like I said, hey, grandma, you're gonna live with me, and you know, I'm gonna take care of you and all these, like all these different things. And like my mom knew I was a caring young man growing up too as well. I always try to put family first. And I just have those same core values now as a man, as a father, as a businessman. Like if you lead with love, like coming to this again, like sometimes it's tough love, right? Sometimes you do things out of love, even though may not be sometimes a decision that somebody wants to hear, or the choice. So it's like, but you're leading from a good place, right? And I think that's the intention behind my decisions that I make in life. Is like I try to live my life in a good way. I try to operate from a good place. I'm big on manifestation too as well.
Do you meditate? Do you meditate, Blake?
I don't. And I don't not to take that back. It's not like I sit down and I'm intentional about meditating. I think sometimes I just sit in my thoughts. I try to process my thoughts. I do a lot of thinking. I do a lot of talking to myself. But yeah, I think for me, it's like when you lead with love, like you're again, people that know you and people that don't know you would know that you have good intentions. Like, and you made a decision based upon like, okay, regardless if it's good, bad, or ugly, like I'm coming from a good place. And so
that's right.
I think that would be one of my key principles. So
it's a big key principle. I've seen it in action from you, sir. So and thank you for sharing a vulnerable part of your story. You've shared a lot of vulnerable parts of your story, so thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So this final portion as we close out, actually, before I have you plug your stuff, and I'm going to like the website. This was my other fun question. You said your first job was at Sonic.
Yeah.
Do you ever still crave or ever go to Sonic and like, that's my jam? I go back there and I get this. I have to ask just because you said what you did for your high school job.
Nah, I would say Sonic's no. And not because it's not good. I mean, I think this, like, we made the burgers pretty good, like at Sonic. And I think fast food restaurant, I think they made it like our breakfast, all different things were it was pretty fresh food for a fast food restaurant. But I did have 2 other jobs outside of that in high school too. It was Applebee's, and I eat Applebee's here and there.
Okay.
But my favorite like favorite like hospitality industry job was Cheesecake Factory. I was a server at Cheesecake.
Oh, you worked at Cheese. I was just talking about them the other day because I rarely go to a Cheesecake Factory.
Yeah.
But they are one of the only one, because I was doing an interview or like a thing online yesterday, and I was using a clear coffee mug. And I'm like, the only restaurant I've ever been to that used clear coffee mugs, and I don't even know if they still do, was Cheesecake Factory. And I always felt like it was so elegant. But when I showed up on the call yesterday and I was using a clear mug, they were like, that's so alarming to actually see how people drink their coffee through the cup. And I'm like, I never really thought about that, but that's true. Like, you don't normally see how somebody takes their coffee.
Yeah. And I would say this,
that's awesome.
I would say this, and that's why I enjoy like Applebee's, Sonic's, and Cheesecake Factory. Cheesecake Factory, I loved it because they do make their food fresh. They have different stations. It's kind of like this. Again, don't slaughter me in the comments, guys, but it's like it's this affordable upscale family restaurant.
I would agree with that.
You can, it's like, you're going to get the white tablecloths. They're going to change the place out for you. You're going to give you the bread, uniform wise, I wore all white. That was like our intention. Like, we had to wear all white. I think now it's kind of black, but it's affordable, right? Where you can take the whole family. Now, granted, you get the cheesecake, you get some strawberry lemonade.
That'll take you a little.
That'll take you up there. But I just, and it's so many menu items. But I liked working in that industry because I got a chance to truly like understand like how to serve people. And because I mean, to know the menu on cheesecake, and I still like go to cheesecake now and I'm like, I know these menu items, like the Louisiana pasta, the different pies. And my favorite pie was the cheesecake was the crazy cheesecake, carrot cake cheesecake. They don't no longer have it.
You know what? You kind of worked at my worst nightmare of restaurants though, because even as a consumer, all 3 of those menus overwhelm me.
Oh yeah. So that's the hack. I mean, the menu like a server, like from front to back is like over at that time, like 37 cheesecakes. There's over 100 menu items. And so when I go to the table, and again, going back to like why I'm glad I learned the skill sets, like, what do you like, Justine, what do you have a taste for today? And actually, let's do a model. Like, what do you have a taste for today?
Red velvet cake.
You have a taste for, so we had this awesome red velvet cheesecake with 2 layers, right? It'll be nice with a cup of coffee at the very end of the day. So
here, see.
Yeah, but I mean, you do that.
No.
Yeah, that's how you get through. But the menu, like you said, like I go in there asking the customer, like, what they have a taste for. Some people's like, I got a taste for some pasta, or I got a taste for some chicken. And so you're kind of like steering them through the path of what they should get.
You're connecting. It's what makes you a great educator too.
I mean,
you're valuing and actually having a conversation.
Yeah. And I mean, you're very observant, like if somebody's on a date, how their mood is, like they got kids, it may take a little bit of while to order.
Yeah.
You want to stay on top of the refills,
if somebody's on a diet but choosing to work at or choosing to eat at Cheesecake Factory, and they're saying, do you have Atkins? Do you have keto?
Yeah. But we have a Skinny-licious meal. I mean,
that's right. That's right.
We have that. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think awesome. That was one of my. So Cheesecake Factory outside of Sonic is probably my favorite one. I still go back to.
Did you find yourself doing what you also did within your school time experiences of like, because when I even hear you talk about Cheesecake Factory, it continues to prove like you definitely have a systems lens through and through. of like, is that what also attracted you to that job? Because though it's a big menu, it's a fancier kind of restaurant and vibe, it was very systematic. Like you mentioned stations, and if anybody's ever eaten there, which I have, it is like clockwork. Even when they're stacked up and you're waiting for a table, I mean, the service is always.
I mean, yeah, you learn about behaviors, you learn about how to deal with conflict. You know, I say this, if you don't get your food right, that's when you see the worst of somebody. When somebody's hangry and like, oh, and then again, it's not your fault. So you got to take ownership. Like, hey, I'm sorry that, you know, this has cheese in it or it has bacon in it. I apologize. So you owning that, right? I will get this to you. You know, I'm going to make sure this gets expedited. But I mean, yeah, I think again, that's when I really learned systems. I learned onboarding, like training, and that was probably the best part about it. We get to taste all the menu items, like, and so you get a chance to like understand like what things taste like and why they taste the way they do, and take a quiz on it. But like if you go to next time somebody's at Cheesecake Factory or any restaurant, just want you to see how the system works. Like, you know, when you get to the table, it's the host that brings you to the table. Then it's the server that comes in, asks you for, you know, what are we drinking today? We have a great strawberry lemonade. Do you like cold beer, etc.? While you getting your drink on, then we're like, okay, I'm gonna give them a few minutes, and then I'm gonna come back to say, okay, are we ready to order? I'm gonna make my daily suggestions, and then from there, the food comes out. Refills, or make sure I'm tapping everybody off with the refills. Can I get any condiments? Because we got a steak knife, ketchup, all that different stuff. While you're eating, some people don't like to have a conversation with the server, right? Like, so when you're eating, hey, they're eating, I'm checking in on you, just saying everything's good. Do you need anything? No, I'm good. Halfway through the meal, we need to go boxes. Let's go boxes, offer the cheesecake, etc. Once you get up, that busboy comes in, turns that table. The next guest comes in, and we're back doing the show all over again.
Like it's like clockwork. So, okay, well, thank you for sharing some of that as far as your hospitality industry experiences. I was more of I worked at landscaping and golf courses. I like working outside. I had one hospitality-based job, actually my very first job at 15, and I quit in a week. Which is funny because my grandparents owned a restaurant growing up. Like,
oh, wow.
But I never really wanted to work in the food industry specifically. Like, I love to cook. I'm a great cook, but I loved being outside. So I don't know. Okay. So final kind of minutes that we have together. I want anything that you want to plug. I call this unapologetically sharing your purpose. I know you have a lot of things that you dabble in, so I can also display anything else here. But what I'm showing you right now, viewers, and if you're listening again, you can come to the Educator Aid YouTube page and watch these, where we also, whether you're listening via podcast platforms or you're viewing, in the show description, we will always have direct links for that particular guest. So that is where you can go back and tap in if you happen to just be listening and not watching right now. But right now I am showing the official Educate Me Foundation. Oh, there's Mr. McGee. This I'm just showing background. So what else do you have popping? What do you want to promote?
Man, let's go to what we do. Go to the Black Teacher Fund. I think that's probably the best one to show right now. So we just
this was also, were you able to share this when you were in NBC?
I did. They didn't promote that, but that's okay. It went across the world on that. So I'm not it was an honor for them to even reach out to us to want to do an interview. So I'm humbly appreciative of that. But so our new initiative is a Black Teacher Fund. It's kind of crazy because like 2 years ago in 2020, when it had a pandemic, I was trying to figure out what Educate Me's response be to like the George Floyd situation, the injustice situation with Breonna Taylor, our students going through the pandemic, being at home, learning loss is happening. So I was like, man, like, what could we do? So we just, we were trying to share resources for teachers and all these different things. And then I made a video about 2 years ago, like, I want to create a Black Teacher Fund, and I was talking about what we're going to do for the Black Teacher Fund. And fast forward 2022, we kind of got a good streamlined approach of what the Black Teacher Fund would look like. And so if anybody would go, you can go to the blackteacherfund.com, that URL, or you can go to our website and click under what we do. And it will say Black Teacher Fund, but really it's an initiative for us to provide like financial resources to aspiring and current Black educators. And I know it says Teacher Fund, but it's open to educators, support staff, counselors, administrators, and also instructional assistants as well. So we have 5 different categories that we're supposed to support for. So test prep, test fee assistance. So those aspiring teachers that want to either pass their practice exam or do a retake for their practice exam, they can get a test voucher from us directly to ETS, which is a testing provider for the practice. We're also doing class.
I'm triggered by those letters. I'm just kidding.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm being serious though, for people to understand, if you're not in the field of education, in our sector, you can very well be accumulating all types of debt going, and yes, I'm speaking personally, going through, and especially when for me, I was a first generation college grad in my family, and I'm paying my way through. But you then can get to the end of it. You're not paid during your student teaching experience, but you are working full-time like a teacher and finishing out any obligations and actually paying your university. So then when you do get a job, and just to give you guys context, when I began teaching in 2006 in Indianapolis public schools, my take-home check every 2 weeks was just under $900. And so when you're coming out and you're then paying it, and I share this very candidly now because I was super embarrassed of it for many years, I had to retake the math portion of that multiple times. And these licensing fees and the fact that your whole life is now on the line, everything you've dreamed about and worked for. There's one test, and I'm not even going to talk about the systemic stuff with that. It's the reality of you're then met with, my God, I literally devoted the past 3.5 years of my life going into debt, applying for scholarships, all of those things. And then to be like, oh, but no, actually you can't even go into your profession. And if you can't scrape together the money because you, God forbid, don't pass a test. So I'm trying to paint this full picture, Blake, not only to me, but so people understand. This is why, one of the reasons why many educators across the country are very, very tired and very upset.
Yeah. And I think too, like, and again, people need to understand, like, again, it's intentionality for us to know like where we put our flag in the ground at. You know, educate me. We're not, unfortunately at the moment, we're not lobbying on Capitol Hill for us to remove this test as a licensing requirement for aspiring teachers. You know, there are some groups that are doing that, right? Until we can move that barrier, we got to do our part, and our part is this test fee. And like you said,
I love it.
No need to be embarrassed, because I had to retake the technology education test in Indiana 3 times. So think about $150 every time you had to take that test, right? And I had test prep. We had in-person test prep with our college professor, and I was like, how am I not passing this test? Like, and so I know it's like from first experience. Justine, you just kind of echoed that too as well. So we want to remove that barrier. So we're definitely glad for our funder for that. But you scroll up a little bit more. So like mental health support. I'm going to say scroll up. Sorry. Classroom grants, materials. So we understand the average teacher spends $450 of their own personal money on classroom materials every single school year to deliver instruction to their students. And like, that should not be a problem. Like Justine just said, $900 every 2 weeks when she started. You know, right now the average teacher in Indianapolis is making between like $45,000 to $50,000 first year. They don't need to be spending money out their own pocket on classroom materials to do what they are hired to do. If the school can't do that, provide the materials, and for us it's like, hey, how can we help out our teachers, right? Like, and so we're doing that too as well. I'm saving the housing down payment to last, but the mental health support piece is big because, as you know, like pandemic push out was real. It wasn't just because teachers weren't getting paid enough. It was like the trauma that we're facing every single day, delivering instruction, the suppressing of their own emotions, the lack of support. And we're like, I mean, right now you have a health plan, you got health insurance, like you still may have a copay, right? There are some different school districts that are doing some innovative things like with Better Talk, or I think Better Help, the therapy platform, but you don't get to pick a Black therapist, right? And so with us,
there's that, but I also want to add this, just again from my own personal lived experiences. There are those of us who also, we might want alternative healing modalities such as hypnotherapy.
mhm,
The insurance doesn't cover that, and that
yeah,
might actually, from an inclusive standpoint and a cultural lens, if you want to go work with a shaman, or you want to hire somebody because they're part of your religious tradition and that aligns for you, that's why I am personally, like, I'm very excited about that fund in particular,
yeah,
within the Black Teacher Fund, because of that line, because that is a very common thing that you're telling me you provide support, but it's still within a very rigid,
yeah.
in this way, with
Yeah,
these others.
and I know it says mental health therapy sessions, but like to hit to Justine's point, therapy sessions is one of the. It's like 3 different supports that we are partnering with community partners for this to like deliver
Right,
out this initiative. And
right.
so therapy sessions is one of them. So like ideally, a teacher would have up to 10 therapy sessions they can go to and use throughout the year outside of their regular health insurance. And so, and these
Right.
are, we have a list of Black therapists in Indianapolis
Right.
that are providing these services. And then the second part is doing like workshops, like mindfulness activities, meditation, yoga. But the
Yeah.
third one is, like you said, like if you need to go to go get a massage, or go to a boxing class, or go to a fitness lab, like we're partnering with ClassPass for that. And so a teacher would have up to 28 credits to go to these different establishments around the city. So really trying to create this whole holistic approach around mental health and wellness for teachers, right? And so super excited about that. And the last one, which is not the least, it's almost one of the biggest ones for us because we feel like this creates wealth, generational wealth for families, is our home down payment assistance program. And so, yes, like if you're a teacher looking to purchase your first home, we are providing home down payment assistance for you. And so we have partnered with community development corporations and also financial institutions that have great first-time home buyer programs. We're talking like no PMI, 0 down payment, credit score minimum 600, $7,500 a closing grant. And so we're actually helping
Wow.
teachers become homeowners, of removing some of those barriers of like, yeah, you're making $50,000 or $60,000 a year being a classroom teacher. You should be afforded the opportunity to become a homeowner. Like, why is that a problem? And so all these supports under the fund for us is our call to action to like, you know what, if we can't control what a teacher makes from their district, can we lower the cost of living for a teacher in other areas of their
Yep.
lives? And
Yep.
so we're providing therapy, we're doing the classroom grants, we're trying to get them to become homeowners. We also have a emergency fund as well. So life does happen. You have an opportunity to get through one of our newest partners, the Halo app, get a 0% $1,000 loan. And it's not like you have to credit score, hard ink. It's none of that stuff, right? It's
Nice.
you're affiliated with Educate Me. You need access to these dollars. So rather you want to do like, a 29, 30% APR loan through a small lender, like
Right. And get
we have that for you. So that's one of our biggest things we're pushing out. And then we have an event we're hosting in January for teachers in Indianapolis called a Teachers Pop-Up Store. That's under our events tab. And so we're like, hey, we want to disperse these classroom materials to teachers, but we don't want to just like say, hey, here's the money. Like, we're trying to make a good event out of it. And so that's something that we've been promoting too. But that's our list of our partners and
wow.
funders. So
Incredible.
yeah, man, we are
So
super
I
excited.
do want to direct people really quick. Again, I don't know what the comments will be or how many views and all
Yeah.
that. I can't predict. But one of the clarifiers I want to give to everybody who may watch or listen, or maybe an educator or an aspiring educator, please remember on that same page, there's a section of frequently asked questions, because this is a Black teacher fund.
Yeah.
So if you have any question about, also, if you are Black or not, there's also guidelines here, because this is not a situation where you're reaching out and going, well, I'm this, can I still apply? So please note that there is an entire section for frequently asked questions and who it's open to and what it applies for. Let's go to your events tab that you're speaking about. And this is a teacher pop-up store. So
Yes.
this will be in January in Indianapolis.
Yep. It's in
Okay.
Indy. It's in Indy.
Okay.
So those who's watching, like, oh my God, I want to educate me to be in my city. I mean, we're trying, right? We feel like
Okay.
we're creating a good blueprint of what a full plan of attack will look like for a city to come on
Okay.
board to like offer all these services. And now we know, like, in a year or so we'll have the data to support it. But I mean, these are, again, you know, our patent book is open. Like, if you want to, you're watching this and like, I want to bring this to my city, you know, you can definitely, you know, come to the website, contact us. We're always here to answer any questions, provide any supports. But we're definitely one of, and we got to, in order to do this work, we had to do it in collaboration with, and we understand we can't do this by ourselves. And so if you're in another city, you're like, oh, this is really cool. Like, how did you guys do this? I mean, I'd love to talk with you. I mean, and
Awesome.
be an ally to kind of help you launch this in your city, right? And so,
Hey,
yeah.
there you go, my Chicago people watching this.
Yeah. So I mean, we're super excited about that. So yeah, teacher pop-up store is gonna be like I wanted to model how a clothing store does a pop-up event. So we're gonna have DJ, we're gonna have videographers, photographers, food. And you come to the store, we're gonna have all the items out for you. And also some special requests for items that you can select, like if you need a document camera or, you know,
Smartboard?
I don't know, maybe not smartboard.
That's a pretty big.
Yeah, but we got some good ones that's, you know, under $200-$300 for sure that the teacher
Yeah, a
can ask for.
document camera. Ooh, teaching with a document camera was life-changing.
Yeah, I mean, like we've seen some items get requests like iPad projectors, because now like teachers are using iPads. So it's like,
nice.
You want to be able to display something on your board.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not a smart board, but you can make it a smart board now with the iPad. So
there you go.
Yeah, I mean, it's the application's right there. You can fill it out.
Yep.
It's pretty simple and straightforward. But in 2023, we're hosting that event, and we're, you know, hope we can bless a lot of teachers before
where can people, oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Where can people connect with you, like on social media, or do you want to connect in that way?
Yeah, I'm always gonna plug my social. So yeah, I actually changed my name on like Instagram, and I think I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook as my real name, Blake Nathan, first name, last name. But on like Instagram, I'm go by the nonprofit guy. And so if you want to follow me on that, because I talk about everything about nonprofit spaces. So board development, strategic planning, budgets, grants, starting a nonprofit, what is a nonprofit versus for profit. So if anybody's watching, it's like, man, I really want to start my own nonprofit one day, you know, go follow me on Instagram at the nonprofit guy. Also my website is 501execs.com. And so
okay, let me do a live reaction though, Blake, because I don't think I've actually looked at your website. I knew you had updated your Instagram handle, and I will also make a plug for him because he puts out some really, really high value educational content on his Instagram. What's the actual website connected to that work? So if like, hey, I want mentoring to start a nonprofit, they know.
Yeah, 501execs.com.
Oh,
so everybody knows about the nonprofit world. 501 is like part of the tax code to have your tax exemption status. So like there's multiple 501s. So
I like this, Blake.
Yeah.
I'm doing a live reaction, but I wanted to ask you though, was there any part of you, because I got to tell you, when I saw that you had shifted, I was like, okay, I like this.
Yeah.
This is awesome. I see where he's going with this. But I did immediately go, is this also a play off of, you know how I don't even remember the area code, so I'm gonna butcher it, in Miami with Pitbull.
305.
He's Mr. 305.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And when I saw it, my first cultural reference was like, like Mr. 501.
Yeah, and I thought about doing that, but I think too, like the issue, like you said, I didn't want to confuse people. Like, what does 501 stands for? But the brand, the company name is 501 Execs LLC, and I mean, and anybody that works with me, they will understand what 501 is. But yeah, I mean, I did it. It was intentional around that because like I want to help nonprofit is X, right?
Yep.
And nonprofit will be potentially be a 501 organization, C4, C3, C5, 6, 7, 8.
Oh, see,
There's
I didn't know there was all those types.
So yeah, I didn't want to call it 501c3 exec. So there's a reason behind the brand name. So like, yeah, there's multiple
Nice.
nonprofit organization classifications for tax exemption status. So like there's you got your fraternity sororities is a different class, your political organizing organizations are another class, your charity organizations is another class. So just people understand too what that is. But
Nice.
but yeah,
I'm about to bookmark.
yeah. So I do free consultations for 30 minutes. So if anybody wants to do a consultation,
Really?
yeah, like right now the price may go up from free. 'Cause
Right now it's free.
yeah, I give a lot of free. I think I get a lot of good information, because biggest question people ask is like, how do I start? Like, and
Right.
it's a whole process, right? And tax exemption status is one thing, but we got to get the business operation stuff done first before we apply for tax exemption status. And so I walk them step by step on what that looks like. I've actually had a couple of successful clients now that applied for the tax exemption status. So now they're waiting, crossing their fingers on to get that letter of determination. And I just try to break it down to the simplest form as possible for people to really understand and digest it. And so, because one of my biggest questions I get on the nonprofit side is like, one, how do I start? And can I have a for-profit company and a nonprofit company? And I always say, yeah, you can have both, right? And I always suggest anybody have a for-profit and a nonprofit. So, but that's a training conversation.
See, you're just inside my 2023 goals.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. It's leverage.
I might have to book my consultation. No, we're like, it's interesting. I find I just love having these conversations on here because there's so many parallels even across all of the different people I've interviewed thus far. So I'm just excited to release them in 2023.
Yeah, let's get it. Let's get it.
Thank you so much, Blake, for all the time that you've given us, and also just entertaining the rabbit trail questions. I know for listeners and viewers, the people who are in education sector, we tend to always go a little longer because, well, we're educators. There's a lot to talk about. So thanks, Blake. And any final words that you have for listeners or subscribers? Otherwise,
man, at the end of the day, I think the biggest thing I think that I'll leave anybody with, like, and I think I haven't brought this up in the entire conversation, so there's gonna be a new jewel. Is this at the end of the day, one, nobody's gonna believe in you as much as you believe in yourself. At the end of the day, you can manifest the dreams that you want to achieve. And then secondly, every day when you wake up, knowing that you can try to be 1% better than yesterday. And so, I think sometimes we have these big goals like, oh, I want to accomplish this, accomplish that. And I think for me, it's just really intentionality about like, today I'm trying to be 1% better. 1% is better than no percent, right? Yeah. So it doesn't matter if it's waking up to go to the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning. Doesn't matter if I want to like eat cleaner. Doesn't matter if I need to like put my phone down for 30 minutes. Today, read a little bit more, be intentional, like playing with my kids. It's just, how can I be 1% better today? And so I'll leave anybody with that. It's just, as you're leading with love, as you're manifesting your dreams and chasing your dreams and accomplishing those dreams, just try every single day to be 1% better than yesterday. So
powerful, my friend and colleague. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to put all your links in the notes when we go live, and be sure to send this your way too, obviously. But thank you so much.
Okay, no problem.
Let's continue to get compassionately curious together in our lives and in our worlds. And until next time, goodbye.
Peace.